A lot of people ask me about how to be more spiritual, how to have a spiritual life. So many of us nowadays are, on the one hand, a little bit disillusioned with the traditional routes that are available to us, and on the other hand, rather confused with what are you supposed to do about it then? How do you create a more spiritual life? How do you manage to have some kind of a place in your life for spirituality, some kind of spiritual practice when you don't even know what path to choose? So the issue of all the many competing paths that are available to us nowadays was addressed in my book Soul Talks, which I've mentioned before. You can find that online if you want to read more about my issues with the spiritual supermarket that people shop around, and they can take a little bit of that spirituality and a little bit of that spirituality, and I think maybe I'll do a Native American steam bath and then go off and chant for a while and then come back and pray to the goddess of the rainbow. And as little silly as that example sounds, it's a good summary of how a lot of people find themselves. And the thing is, people do want to do what's best for themselves. The most important thing, despite the confusion of the world out there, is that we all still hanker for something spiritual in our lives. We all still know that there is more to this material reality than meets the eye, and we all still yearn for some way to connect with that truth. So over the next few months, once a month, I'm going to be giving you a little guidance on how to create a spiritual practice for yourself that is authentic. It's based on real things, not something somebody sucked out of the air, but at the same time is non-religious, so that if you're a religious person, you can maintain your religious life and your religious practice, and everything I talk about in these episodes will not conflict with that. And if you're a person who doesn't follow an orthodox path like that, you will find a way to connect with the quality that is so unique to human beings on this planet, and that is the quality of soul. Because one way or another, religion or spirituality or my method or your method, the essence of everything that we're asking is, how do I become more soul aware? How do I follow the path of my soul consciousness, whatever that is, but my soul, which is beyond my everyday personal experience? Because let's face it, a lot of the time we're confused and the world is confused and life on earth feels pretty hard. And all of us sense inside that there's much more to life on earth than just the physical practice of being ourselves. Today I'm going to be talking about why do we need a spiritual practice and what is a spiritual practice, and maybe demolish a few myths so that we're ready to start building one of our own. One of the challenges in even seeking a spiritual practice is the question of why do we do it. So I've spoken about a whole bunch of reasons there, and just the whole issue of being a human being. But we might actually have specific reasons. And the first thing we need to do is question our reasons and make sure that our reasons are authentically coming from that same place, the soul, as we are trying to reach. Our reasons are sometimes, I want to escape from this world, or I want to find out the meaning of life, or perhaps even I want to become more psychically sensitive. I want to be able to sense energy and see auras. These are the kinds of answers I've been given when I ask people, why do they want to practice? Why do they want a spiritual practice? What does it really mean to them? I think the first thing that we really need to do is guard against the answer coming from our egos. Because the ego wants an outcome, the ego has desires, the ego wants a result in the world. The world is not so much what the soul is about. I mean, after all, aren't we trying to say there's more to this world and there's more to the human experience? So, in questioning our question about the ego, we ask ourselves, is there some kind of phenomenon that will come as a result of being more tuned in spiritually, like reading auras or sensing the future or something like that, and bust ourselves on that. I'm not looking for any phenomena. There is a lure of spiritual power, but even the lure of spiritual power, the lure of being more spiritually evolved or conscious, hopefully not more than the next person, because I always want to know who gets to measure that, and what does that entitle you to. So I don't think there's something like more alert and more conscious or whatever. Our goal as an individual human being is to enhance our own consciousness, not in comparison to other people, but in comparison to the state of the world. Not to be better than the world, but, as the great masters have taught us, to somehow learn to detach from the world. So our real goal in spiritual practice is to learn to break away from the overwhelming materiality of the world and the overwhelming pain and suffering of the world. If we were to have a goal, if you have a goal in your spiritual practice, it's not such a great idea to say, my goal is that by next month I can meditate and see the divine or connect with the divine. I think a really good goal to have when you're establishing a spiritual practice is to say something like, my goal today is to manage this a little bit better than yesterday, to sit more without restlessness, or without allowing the mind to wander, or without worrying about things in the world, if we're doing something like meditating. So whatever the actual ingredients of our spiritual path may be, my goal is to make a little bit of an advance every day, but there is no sign of a conclusion. You know, when it comes to goals of the ego, and learning to bust ourselves and trap ourselves on the goals of the ego, there is one goal that often people don't think of as the ego's goal, and that is, you know, my goal is to learn my lessons. I want to learn my lessons correctly. I want to make sure that I don't come back to this earth, if reincarnation is true, to learn that same stuff over and over again, or end up in some bad or difficult situation because of these difficult lessons, and especially because of the repeating of our lessons. We tend to get confused about what lessons are. We tend to think of lessons as something like what we do in a classroom. In a classroom, we get specific information that we are supposed to remember. And the knowledge then that we hang on to in that memory is supposed to help us elsewhere in our lives and later on. And we supposedly should never have to repeat that lesson. I mean, you don't go back to school. So then people wonder, why do they never seem to learn from bad experiences? And why do those bad experiences happen again and again? And why am I not getting the desired outcome and making progress? Why am I not getting an A on my report card of life? I think we're a little bit confused about what those lessons are all about, because, as I'm about to tell you, there is actually only one lesson. The lessons business seems to come mostly from our kind of poor understanding of the Indian concept of karma, mixed in with bits of our own kind of Western culture, where Western culture's got this very strong link between behavior and reward. Work hard and you will be rewarded. Very essence of Western spirituality and Western capitalism and Western culture, all very much based on that notion of you've got to work and you've got to earn and you have duties. And while those things are not necessarily not true, they are not connected to karma really. The best definition of understanding what karma is it's an accumulation of energy. It's an accumulation of reaction energy. Because when we act on the world by intention and by action, the reverse effect must come back to us. But instant karma does not exist, as much as people would like to believe that it does. The universe is not magical in that way, and there's some one thing watching that's going to punish or reward. But the idea of karma is that the energy of reaction is actually stored at the spiritual level. And when we die, that has to take birth again in order to seek to dissipate into the world, because all energy seeks entropy. All energy wants to dissipate. So that's why the process of birth happens again and again, in a very oversimplistic nutshell, but that is that story. And the result of that is that it isn't really about a reward or a punishment, that everything that we do eventually re-emerges in another lifetime in some other fashion. So that energy basically draws experiences to us, seeking to neutralize itself. So that means that we can assume that in this lifetime, the stuff that is happening is drawn to us, or somehow, however exactly the universe operates, appears in our lives because of that force of karma. That somehow these experiences are the consequences of other actions. We tend to take that a little bit too literally. So we have a bad experience in a relationship, and we tend to think that that means that I must have been terrible at relationships or been mean to my partner in a previous lifetime. Now I'm going to be good in relationships. So we have a really tough relationship, but we really learn the hard way and we get it right and we come out on top and we think, finally I learned that lesson about partners. And yet the same relationship happens again in the form of another person in another time. And we're thinking, the universe is cruel. I thought I'd learnt that lesson. That isn't the kind of lesson that we learn. It's that Western idea of once you've learnt a lesson, it teaches you to not do that again, or now you can master it and never have to go through that experience again. If that were true, the end result of that would be that we become better at everything and we master this material world increasingly. We have good relationships, we have good work, we have more money, we've got lots of love. The idea behind the Western idea that we're learning lessons all the time seems to be to achieve material comfort. Where is the soul in that? Where is the spirituality in that outcome that says, I'm learning in order to master the material world? We are trapped in our quest for our perfect material world, just as those deluded individuals who seek physical immortality, seeking physical perfection in this world is a trap. We are not trying to make a beautiful, perfect, wonderful world. And quite frankly, the idea of learning your lessons and then gaining the information and then coming back in another lifetime presuming you don't have to learn that again, well, I don't know if you've noticed, but we don't really remember what happened in a previous lifetime. So if I had a bad experience in relationships in a previous lifetime, I don't know about it, and obviously I am doomed to repeat it. So it isn't the knowledge or the quantity of the information, it isn't the actual experience I'm trying to learn. What am I trying to learn? People come to the astrologer all the time and say, what are my life lessons? And I always think that reveals a kind of an idea of a cruel or absent God, or a very cold and empty universe. I mean, if we came here to learn something, like what is my lesson? I'm trying to find out my lesson. What kind of a cruel universe or cruel God would send you to be enrolled in a course of study but not tell you what you're studying, not tell you what you need to know about it, not telling you how to prepare for exams, not even telling you what your mark was, just basically saying, looks like you failed. Doesn't sound like that's what lessons could be. I mean, in that scenario, you'd have to go to lots of random lessons all over the place to kind of find out, am I covering my lesson? And people go to astrologers and other diviners to find out, what is my lesson? I mean, I'm an astrologer. I'd love to believe that we are supposed to go to astrologers so that we can find out our lessons. But newsflash, there's no injunction in any religious text that says, get thee to an astrologer before we start. It would be great, I know. And it certainly helps us to become more conscious of ourselves. That's what astrology is all about. And I would even argue that in order to follow a spiritual practice and to gain the ability to learn the lesson of life, you do need to know yourself better, and astrologers are one of those that can help you do that. But bottom line is, I don't think God or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, requires people to have their charts read. At the bottom line, it distracts us from what the real lessons are when we try and go to the astrologer. Tell me what my lessons are, I'll go and learn those, and then I'll be spiritually beautiful. It sounds a little flawed, once again, not as easy as that. Even people who are not so focused in the idea that they've got to make something better in life, or that trying to improve their world seem to think that there's something specific they're trying to learn. And that's why I would say, since memory does not survive from life to lifetime, and no one's telling you what the lesson is, it seems unnatural to me that those things should be involved in our journey of trying to find out who we are, remembering lessons from the past, or knowing some specific lesson like the subject is science. It just doesn't make sense into, if we are trying to grow our consciousness, then why would we be at such an extreme disadvantage? Why would it be that one little culture develops astrology and there's a million other cultures on the world that just don't? And so what, are they doomed? Is there some injunction that says no matter where in the whole world of time and space you're born, there's one little group somewhere in some little corner of time and place that are the only ones whose book has the answer? Go find that book. Actually, the real story is a lot simpler and a lot more sensible. And we should expect that, because I would think that if there is a way to be spiritual, if there is a way to grow spiritually, if there is a way to find something spiritually, I would imagine it is innate to us. It comes with us. It's not in someone's culture or someone's place or some era of history. All the things which are inaccessible to the very vast majority of human beings who will ever live. Makes better sense that somehow it's inside me. Somehow it's related to existing human abilities, existing human talents, knowledge that all human beings have or have access to without finding a special school or place or time. That seems to me what would be the most sensible. If there is a universe that says you must evolve spiritually, you must grow your consciousness, then it would seem to me that the tools in order to do that must be at our side. They must come with the territory. That's what makes sense to me. So then, there is only one lesson that we are trying to learn, and that lesson is that the material world is not what is real. It is what is transient. It is what is illusionary. It is characterized by suffering. And suffering, as the masters have told us, and I've mentioned on this show before, is really brought about by attachment to material things. So the only lesson is let go of attachment. Detach from the material world. Detach from material outcomes. Know that you are a creature of spirit, and that your spiritual reality is the only reality that matters. That lesson equalizes us all at the level of soul, at the level of experience. It shows that no matter what your experience of life, the experience of the most lowly worker is no less significant than that of the most lofty leader. All experiences can be handled the same way. All can bring us to the same conclusion that will help our self-realization. There is no need for luck, and there is no need for some special opportunity. There's no need to be more evolved than someone else. All of us have the same opportunity to learn the lesson, to come to the realization that everything must be telling me that the material world is not what is real, because that's what pain comes from. If we have a difficult relationship experience or a difficult work experience, our job isn't to learn how to do relationships better lifetime to lifetime. It would definitely help you within the same lifetime. So do get the transient lessons, the life lessons. It's just the soul lesson that is the one that we share, and that is that if relationships cause you pain and jobs cause you pain, there must be more to the human experience than relationships and jobs and all the other stuff of the material world. That is the lesson. There is more to the human experience than all of those things. The human experience is a spiritual experience. No matter how unfair life is, and no matter how unlevel the playing field is, we all start at the same position. We've all got the same opportunity, because we all have to do the same thing, and that is to learn to detach from the significance of the material world and its material goals and material outcomes. But in order to do so, we don't need to escape the world. We don't need to go and live on the mountaintop and give away all our possessions. Might make it easier if we did that, but we just really need to learn how to do it in the world. We need to show as much equanimity as possible. We need to concentrate on not getting too involved in the pain and the suffering or the relentless search for outcomes and rewards, That is the message of all the great teachers and is the foundation of the spiritual practice that we are going to create together. So now we can state a goal or a purpose without getting too caught up in achievement and ambition. Our purpose in spiritual practice, as in life lessons, is to increase our spiritual self-awareness, to increase our self-realization, and reduce our attachment to the material world and all its pain. Quite a thought. How does a spiritual practice help us in dealing with karma? Well, it's the process of creating karma that makes us come back into the world all the time and become attached and get caught up. So the most directly beneficial effect of spiritual practice is that it creates some of the detachment and awareness all on its own. That actually taking the opportunity to put away from your regular life and do something completely separate from it that's not related to any outcome takes the first step in separating yourself and asking you, what is your relationship to that world out there? Is there a relationship to that world out there? So it does help. And even if that was the only effect, it would go a long way to helping us, but it's not the only effect. If it is karma that creates more action, that creates more problems, one of the ways is to find places in our life where we don't act on the world for an outcome. And spiritual practice is another one of those. At the beginning of all of this, I said how we're not outcome oriented. If spiritual practice is done properly and sincerely, it won't create new karma. And a lot of it helps kind of balance out or negate the energy of karma. By the way, it shouldn't be our intention. We shouldn't be sitting there thinking, I'm burning more karma, and there goes another gram of karma, I'm burning more karma. We've just got to get on with it in the various practices that I will talk about in the weeks ahead. It doesn't mean we can get rid of all karma because, well, we've got to do what we've got to do. It comes from the past. It's not going to evaporate. But by burning it as such, it does increasingly help us maintain detachment from the world, detachment from outcomes, and we can actually relieve ourselves of some of the pain and suffering. So let me then outline the benefits of spiritual practice for you. It leads us to a greater realization of our true spiritual selves. It helps neutralize the effects of past karmas. It helps prevent the accumulation of new karmas. It helps us accept what cannot be changed, and it creates a lifestyle that is more satisfying at an inner level and helps us be less affected by the demands and difficulties of the material world. At the same time, it allows us to live better, more wisely, and with more appropriate goals in the material world. It sounds like a magic potion, and what's great about this magic potion is that you have access to it without buying magic potions, without the special book, without the special place that you have to travel to. It's all right there within you, waiting to be discovered. So join me on this journey. Once a month, one of our episodes will be dedicated to helping you create your spiritual path. So now that you know what it's all about, watch out for next month when we take step 1. Time for a quick question from James. And James, you're very much working on your path and you've identified a lot of what's important about it for you. And you're at a point where there's a possible journey ahead for you. And you've asked me the question, would coming back to Cape Town at this point be a step backwards? James, it will not. It is an opportunity to regroup. You're early days in your journey, and there is actually plenty of time to regroup, to pull together, to reassess. Especially you know that you're in a state of a little bit confused, and will this happen or will that happen? And I want to ask you, hey, what's the rush? So it's okay if that seems to be where the path wants to lead, to take a few steps back and regroup. You remember, you come from Cape Town, so Cape Town is your power spot. So even if you are destined to venture to other places and find paths in other places, sometimes you need to get back, find your connection, get your energy back, know where you stand, and take your next adventure out into the world. So judge it by circumstances, but if it looks like maybe I need to stop a few months back in Cape Town, go right for it. You will be stronger for it. Remember, if you've got a question about your life, about something that's happening right in front of you, email me at this address or visit my website. And be sure, of course, to join in, as always, next week, YouTube at noon or Cape Town Television at 7:30 p.m. for another episode. See you there.